greatest fear of Americans is standing in front of a group giving a talk.
I always try to be myself, whether I'm hosting, emceeing, or if I'm the presenter.
There are people in the entrepreneurial world who've made 200 presentations for a business idea.
Good presentations are almost never an accident.
Hello, I'm Amalia Barreda, and welcome to FYI Video, Delivering Successful Presentations. In this video, you're going to learn how to give a winning presentation. We're going to identify the key characteristics of effective presenting and apply them to an actual presentation, from preparation to practice to delivery by a team whose business is presentation. We'll also speak with several experts who will share their insights into the whys, whens, and hows of successful presenting. We'll start by asking our first communications expert, Manny Sherberg, to define presentation for us. Manny?
A presentation is what happens anytime you or anyone else attempts to teach or convince or persuade another person or persons primarily by voice.
Just when do we make business presentations?
Anytime you do any one of those, or two or all three of them, you are making a presentation. A presentation, therefore, can be something as short and informal as a 2-minute discussion with an employee on how to do a certain job. On the other hand, it can be something a good deal more formal and lengthier, like a speech, let's say.
But how does good presenting benefit you in terms of career advancement? Let's ask Ted Hollingworth, a business professor and consultant who has critiqued several thousand presentations during his 20 years of teaching at Emerson College. Ted?
Their research indicates quite clearly that first-line supervisors spend 70% of the workday communicating, that middle managers spend 80% of the workday communicating, and that CEOs spend 94% of the workday communicating. So the bottom line of that research is the higher you go, the more you communicate. And by the way, with the CEO, 69% of that time was oral communication. So there is a great deal of correlation between your ability to succeed as a manager and your ability to communicate.
Then why are most of us reluctant to make oral presentations? The answer lies in the word oral. Where the written word can be preserved and reviewed, the spoken word is fleeting, and once uttered, it's gone, as in the expression, in one ear and out the other. So it's up to the presenter to make an oral communication good enough to lodge between the ears and become memorable. That's why our training revolves around overcoming the #1 obstacle to successful presentations, the human ear. Would you explain, Manny?
We human beings learn primarily through the eye. We're visual creatures. We're eye-oriented. We don't do so well when it comes to hearing, to listening, to getting messages through the ear.
So how can we craft our message so it gets through the ear? Manny has developed an acronym to help guide us. Manny?
That acronym, interestingly enough, is EAR, ear. Because if you remember ear, which is really the first problem you've got to overcome in making a presentation, then you can remember, I think, that the E stands for easy, the A stands for apt, and the R stands for real. Easy, apt, and real.
How do you make a presentation easy?
Good presentations make only one main point. There can be other points in the presentation, but they should be secondary, subsidiary to the main point.
And everything in the presentation should support that main point: information, stories, arguments, examples, and visuals. But how should a presentation be organized so that the main point is sure to come through? Let's ask Pam Soden, a management consultant who teaches presentation skills. Pam?
Any presentation's going to have an open, a body, and a close. That is, we're going to be telling them what we're going to tell them, we're going to tell them what we tell them, and we're going to tell them what we told them.
In other words, repetition is key. Ted, what are the chances of communicating successfully without it?
The above-average person, under ideal circumstances, knowing they're going to be held accountable for the information, listening to a very good speaker for short periods of time, will have a listening efficiency of about 25%. Now that means if you're smart and they're smart and all of you are trying as hard as you can, they're only going to miss 3/4.
And that means that we have to do whatever we can to help them get it. We have to tell them, and tell them again, using a technique we call creative repetition. Manny, can you give us an example?
I guess there's probably no more famous example in American history than Lincoln's line in the Gettysburg Address. We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. Actually, if you go to a dictionary and look up consecrate, dedicate, and hallow, you'll find that the three words mean essentially the same thing.
Focusing on one main point and using creative repetition will help make your presentation easy for your audience to understand and absorb. But how can you make it apt? Where do you begin? Pam, how can you make sure your presentation is apt for your audience?
Well, I want to know as much as I can about the audience that I'm going to be presenting to. I want to know what's the purpose that the person that's asking me to come in and make the presentation is looking to fulfill. What is the audience like? You know, what kind of experience have they had in the past? Have they been exposed to the topic that I'm going to be dealing with at all?
In other words, let your audience know what's in it for them. Focus on their interests and concerns. Let them know the benefit of accepting your position or of listening to your presentation. Manny, can you give us another tip for making information apt?
Good presenters learn to talk in you statements, Y-O-U. The personal pronoun you is perhaps the most compelling, the most powerful word in the language as far as presenters are concerned, because when people hear the word you, their interest perks up.
And how do you make a presentation real? How can you transfer your enthusiasm for your topic to the audience? Manny?
Be honest, be open, be candid with your listeners, and let your feelings show. Energize yourself and come across as somebody who really cares about the subject matter.
Can you suggest another technique to make the presentation real?
Talk in pictures. There are many ways you can do this. You can use what's known as action language. In action language, you don't talk about moods, let's say, or feelings or emotions, because those are always abstract things that we can't in any way deal with at a sensory level. If you say, for example, she was bored, there's nothing to come to grips with there. There's nothing to look at, nothing that you can engage at a sensory level.
What would be more descriptive, more active?
Say she yawned and squirmed in her chair. Or she yawned and looked at the ceiling distractedly.
Can you suggest any other ways to involve the audience?
Another way in which you can make presentations real is to tell stories.
A particular kind of story?
A relevant story, a pertinent story that brings the abstraction to life, makes it real for the people who are listening.
The guideposts for any presentation, from small to large, from intimate to formal, from